EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the Mastercard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village. Welcome to EdTech Monday. Now, despite the growing demand, Africa's ICT infrastructure still lags way behind. In Uganda, for example, more than 86% of the population lack access to the internet and internet-enabled devices, and only 18% of Ugandans have access to electricity. COVID-19 escalated the need for ICT in education and exposed these gaps. And in today's EdTech Monday, we ask how can these gaps be filled? So thank you for joining us and welcome my guests. So I'll start with you, Michael, if you can introduce yourself to our audience.
Yes, hello viewers, my name's Michael Ochero. I serve with the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance as the Acting Commissioner for E-Services. The ministry, of course, is responsible for rollout of ICT infrastructure that we are discussing today. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Letitia.
My name is Nashtende Letitia. I work with Women in Technology Uganda. Women in Technology is an NGO for women empowerment in technology and entrepreneurship.
All right, thank you so much, Charles.
Thank you, viewers. I'm Charles Ochan. I work for UTouch Uganda. UTouch work with youth in technology in rural community. Thank you.
Michael, I want to start with you. Just how big is this infrastructure gap in our ICT space? I know that we've mentioned some numbers around access to electricity, around access to internet-enabled devices, but I know at the ministry you see how big the gap is. So just how big is it?
Well, to begin with, there's been a lot of work done to put in place that infrastructure. If you're to talk of the amount of fiber optic cable in the country, you're talking of about 12,000 kilometers, of which about 4,000 belongs to government. The private sector has built the rest. The major challenge is in what we call the last mile, reaching the end user, and that is where the gaps are. And that is where we are putting in interventions to close those gaps, both in terms of policy, in terms of laying out infrastructure, in terms of the ecosystem, including skills and provision of devices.
Have you seen the private sector embrace the investment in this kind of ICT infrastructure? Because it's very expensive, for example, to lay fiber optic. Are the private sector members engaging with government in this regard?
Yes, definitely they are. And of course, one of the common beneficiaries of that infrastructure is the telecom sector. We do get our internet services through that fiber infrastructure. And therefore, all of us can now get to WhatsApp and social media because of all of that. In terms of training, we have schools using that infrastructure. We have the school labs, which have recently been equipped by government, over 1,000 ICT labs, and using that infrastructure, the training is going on. So definitely the private sector is utilizing that infrastructure.
All right, thank you. Letitia, if I could come to you, how does this gap affect, for example, women in ICT? How do these infrastructure gaps affect young people, young girls in the ICT space?
First of all, the equipment, laptops are expensive to acquire, phones are expensive to acquire, and we haven't been fully capacitated with the digital skills, and we do not like the mileage he's talking about. I am imagining a school I work with in Adjumani, and thank God you talked about COVID. Yes, they have a fully functioning computer lab, and the network itself, it's affecting studies. Even a young girl that wants to participate, the fact that they can't afford a phone, they have to go through mommy's phone or daddy's phone, and you need to give reasons as to why. It kind of makes learning slow, and you lose interest because you have to give accountability all the time. And to me, as an entity in Kampala coordinating a lesson in Adjumani, the on and off internet connectivity, and then the network is off, let me climb a tree, let me get here, it loses interest, and yeah, it just kind of slows learning.
Charles, does this mean that these challenges are insurmountable? I know that things that you do at UTouch, for example, solve part of this problem. How have you seen your solution sort of working? And if you had to speak to government in terms of scaling that solution, what would that look like?
Well, one thing I would say is, in my experience, the things that we do is part of the solutions to the bigger problem. One, in the community where I come from and where I grew up, is accessibility has been the problem. That is number one. Number two, we also grew up in a community with different norms. Say, for example, not everyone have equal right to use technology. She mentioned about young girls, and you realize every time a young girl touches a phone, she needs to give accountability. And also, people look at technology differently. Most people look at technology as a tool for leisure. And this has also affected learning a lot, because many people take up technology so that they can, pass time. Literally, when COVID breaks, that is when people realize that, okay, we can now use this tool as a means to reach out to education, to reach out to economic, to reach out to many other options that, can help. What I can say is what the government has done so far is good, because we realize the infrastructures are there, but also the gap here is the sustainability, because they're quite expensive. Most private sector, even small businesses, are unable to tap into these opportunities that the government has put in place, because it is quite expensive. And even if they could tap in, it would only be for a short while. Maintenance and sustainability is really a problem, especially in rural communities. Of course, mobile telecommunication has done a lot of job. They have done a great job. But like I said, looking at the accessibility of the devices that can easily tap into those infrastructures built by telecommunication, it's hard. Many people do not have access to smartphone. So I would still say there is a little bit of a gap, especially in school. In one of the schools that UTouch partner with, the school have the library installed, but of course, the internet is, like she mentioned, is on and off. So when the students want to learn, they need to bring their tablet to where there is a Wi-Fi and download all the content before, then go back to school, then use the tablet to learn. So you look at that gap, it makes it expensive.
Michael, I want to come to you, because it's unlikely that we will scale connectivity for everyone in the short term. But there are other smaller solutions, like use of USSD, where you have at least basic connectivity, and that could be a solution. Do you see accessibility or connectivity? Which one is the bigger challenge? Is it accessibility or is it connectivity?
As government, we're looking at multiple technologies, not only fiber connectivity. So especially for last mile, various technologies are being used, wireless, you name it. In terms of accessibility, there are a number of interventions being looked at. Some have already started. For instance, there's the ICT Park that was recently launched by His Excellency in Entebbe. And that one is supposed to house local manufacturers of devices, including the smartphones. So we expect, actually it's one of the targets for government, that devices, the cost should be lowered. One of the other targets is that the cost of broadband, of internet, should be lowered. The ultimate target is about $20 per megabits per second. And that is, interventions are being undertaken to make sure we reach there. So various interventions are being looked at. Also, innovation is one of the areas being looked at, because applications cost is one of the challenges. So presently we have a lot of local developers who are taking over the formerly imported systems. So we expect reduction of costs through various options.
Letitia, is this a solution that works? And I know you work with a lot of local innovators in the space. Is this a solution that works? Have you been able to grow up that chain with government and scale solutions from your own community?
The solution works because yes, we have so many developers and they have done amazing work. But I would say 50% of this work stops to the innovation hubs, and which of them also do not have the capacity to let these developers exploit their work. So maybe the question would be is how is government willing to intentionally look for the developers versus the assumption of when I go to Ministry of ICT, I am definitely going to get developers there. So apparently these people are down here, yes, they have the solutions and they are willing to sensitize the community awareness on how to use this, because at the end of the day it's their product, they're excited about it, and they want, if you've noticed, safe border is all over the place and they are making noise about it, whether you're young or not, they have flyers. So how many more safe borders are there and they are not so aggressive because they feel like I do not have a platform? So maybe if we can work on getting more of these people a platform on where they can showcase their work, attach them to different sectors they can support and work, it will be good. However, this will require us to go away from experience versus a qualification. Yeah.
I just want to stay with that. You used the example of Safe Border, which is a very good example. But you see, Safe Border is a Kampala thing. When you're solving an EdTech problem, you need to solve it for Adjumani, Moyo, Kisoro, Fort Portal, and everyone. So what is it that's stopping innovators in your spaces from being able to solve that problem at scale?
It goes back to the connectivity, because with our Code Girls program, we were working with the Colibri e-learning platform, and yes, we have computer labs in these schools, but they do not have internet. And the best way you can utilize the e-learning platform for Colibri is when you have internet. This is where a student doesn't need a teacher. Even when the teacher is out of class, a student can just log on to Colibri and it has practical videos on how to do a science experiment. But like he was saying, we need good internet. And because I work for Women in Technology, we have also noticed that with these computer labs, boys tend to be more aggressive. They utilize the computers, and when the internet is slow, I'll just be like, I'll come back tomorrow. Yeah.
Charles, how do we scale these solutions? Solutions like UTouch, for example, how do you put at scale?
What I think is, I like the points he made, but also the other thing I would think of is when you gave example of Safe Border, it's actually what I used when I was coming here. It's very effective. When you look at the setup of the city, is quite different from the rural setup. And I think young innovators need to think with the people who are in the rural environment, so that when we are coming up with the solutions, we need to come up with solutions that can be adapted in an environment where there is low connectivity, of course, no low knowledge and low accessibility. So what we have been doing as UTouch is, first of all, we know for anyone to come up with all these, people needed to first of all learn how technology works. So we focus more on training people on how they can use technology. This would give them the impressions that they can equally become an innovator. And we give them a space and the tools that they can use. If you want to do prototyping, you'll have a space and a tool that you can access. Looking at how sophisticated this can be, many people will not have the computer that meets the requirement for doing a specific design. So that is how basically we think we needed to take the services, first of all, closer to the people in rural environment, to also participate in the design of solutions to the problems that affects them directly from the rural environment.
Michael, this is really your problem, because you see, as government, the private sector can only work where they can make money. but education is really a public good. Everyone, everywhere must be able to access it. So what measures are you putting in place for these innovators to develop solutions, taking in mind places that have low connectivity, places where only USSD might potentially work, places where 3G and 4G are still very much mayhem for them? How is government dealing with those areas?
Okay, as a government, we have positioned ourselves as the #1 consumer of the products developed by the innovators, such that they do not remain at the innovation hubs. I can talk of several. We have the e-procurement system, EGP. We have the EMIS system running Ministry of Education. We have the IHMS system for health, all developed at the innovation hub. So what we hope to do, possibly through a program like this one, is to create some mindset change among the public, such that they can also have confidence in our own systems, such that we can replace these products, import substitution, such that we create jobs and also we reduce the cost, reduce the outflows of revenue from the country. In terms of connectivity, yes, government started with tertiary institutions by connecting them to the national backbone infrastructure, the national fiber. So we also are planning to connect the other institutions, the secondary schools, primary schools, and that is what I hear that we really need. So definitely that is coming.
All right, thank you so much. We'll take a very short break, but when we get back, to continue the discussion on the challenges of infrastructure access in the EdTech space. EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village. Thank you so much for staying with us on EdTech Monday. We're talking about infrastructure gaps in the ICT space that affect EdTech, and we have such an elaborate guest list today to talk about this. But before we took the break, and I want to start with you, Charles, these problems that we have are shared problems in the private sector and government. And sometimes the solution comes in being able to talk to each other or being able to be in the same room as you talk about the problem. What is it that you say should be done around putting together those small working teams that can approach these infrastructure problems so that as they are solved, there's inclusivity, but also the solution works?
Thank you very much. What I can say is that collaboration can be key from down to top. Looking at what the government has so far done, it's great. Also, what I see lack a little bit is sensitization. People are really not quite sensitized on how best they can utilize the opportunities that has been brought forward by the government. Mm-hmm. Many people are unaware of the opportunity that exists even in the Ministry of ICT. And you find a lot of young developers struggle with their work, not knowing where to go. Not until this gap is breached, we are going to lag a little bit behind in accessing some of the opportunities and some of the good work that our young people are doing out there. The other thing that I also look at is when it comes at the policy making level, certain taxes need to be reduced, especially on acquiring gadgets and things that has to do with connectivity, including purchasing data. If you cannot have a fiber installed in your business, is there a way you can use the mobile service provider to access these services cheaply or with a little bit a reduced tax on it? If this can be discussed at the policy making level, I think it will improve on the level of accessibility and as well as sustainability of what the government has already put in place. And I also think capacity building would be key. When we look at the lab installed by government in various government schools, I would give example where I come from in Gulu. We have a school that is fully fledged install internet lab, except that you realize when you go, there are lots of, the computers are not spoiled. But it is lacking maintenance and also a technical person who can eventually, from time to time, take up this responsibility. And I think if capacity building can be part of the Ministry of ICT interest, or it will help a little bit in terms of making sure that what they put in place exists and it is being maintained as it is required.
Letitia, how can government and the private sector work together to solve this infrastructure problem?
We need to collaborate, like work as a team. But the most important thing as we collaborate is co-create together. What does the government think works and what do we think works? And how can we implement this versus being in a meeting and then we go to next. And also, how do we include the people that we are serving in these co-creation sections, because they understand what they are going through. They know what they want and how they want it. So our role will be to build on that. And then also, I feel like, how can we, policy-wise, can we remove a policy on second-hand things? Because someone just needs a second-hand phone to do remote work. Like, all I need is a working machine. I have internet. I do not care whether it's brand new or not. Yeah, so how can we work together? We can collaborate, have meetings, fund the private sector to do the work on your behalf. Funding can also be a nice way of solving such issues.
Michael, I want to ask you a slightly different question. Normally, when the private sector and government want to work together, the private sector often says, you know, government works slowly. But government has a lot more stakeholders than the private sector. Before you move, you need to get all the stakeholders on board. And sometimes that's not something that is easily appreciated by the private sector. So you have different working culture. So how do you reconcile this working culture? And in your experience working with the ministry, how do you reconcile this working culture so that you produce a solution that you need urgently?
Of course, there's a very clear process through which policy is developed. Of course, it could be initiated through a ministry and then has to be passed maybe to cabinet and maybe to parliament. And that's how it then becomes law. But of course, yes, definitely we know in the ICT sector, technology has tended to move a little faster than regulation. So yes, definitely government has been responding to that. I know there's several policies being fast-tracked. A lot of effort is being undertaken to quickly develop the required policies and a lot of consultation. One of the ways is that we've been doing that is to start development with using the public sector, the private sector, public sector, all the stakeholders working together right from the beginning. And that has tended to quicken the development of policies.
All right, Charles, our time is now fast spent, so I'm going to ask you to make concluding remarks around the infrastructure challenge. We've discussed a great deal about how to get the solutions, so what are your concluding remarks around this conversation?
Thank you very much. My concluding remarks to this conversation is, given my experience, and I've taken part in a lot of community development, in ICT, I look at Uganda as one of the potential nations that can drastically move very fast when technology is fully embraced. But of course, like we've been mentioning, we need to figure out how to work together, of course, with the other stakeholders. And I think our major stakeholders in this should be the people that we design solutions for. If we can design it together with them, they understand their problems, they know how to solve them, but they don't know how to use the technology to get solutions to their problems. So working with them would enable the government and the private sector to move faster in the solutions that they're trying to develop to solve some of these local community needs. I look at this as something that we really need to coexist. I know we all have different priorities, even the government have bigger priorities, but of course the private sector want to do a small thing to enable them to achieve one thing at a time. But of course the government need to fill in all those gaps. So for me, I think partnership and collaboration would be a key as we move forward.
Letitia, what would be your concluding remarks on this?
Thank you. A shortcut to infrastructure would be if we equipped the innovation spaces with the infrastructure that is needed. WE2 has 2 computer labs, and all it needs is a young woman from wherever they are, just come use the lab. We have internet. NITA provided us with internet. We have internet, we have the infrastructure, we have the capacity, we have a group of experts that can just help a few developers or young girls refine the skills they have. And then as we grow towards making sure phones are accessible, computers are accessible, in a shortcut, if you can make sure the innovation labs, the private sector, the key players in this tech space are fully equipped, that would be a good thing to start with as we look forward to the bigger picture.
Michael, what are your concluding remarks on this?
Yeah, as a landlocked country, we do have challenges in reaching the sea cables, and definitely that has been one of the factors that have led to the high cost of broadband. However, as government, there are several routes being developed. Recently, there was the route through Tanzania to the sea cables that was developed. So infrastructure is being developed quite largely. There are gaps in terms of skills, and as mentioned earlier, we've actually started institutionalizing the ICT function across the local government, setting up departments such that applications, services can be supported all around the country. And we call upon the private sector, the public, to support government in these efforts.
Michael, maybe before I let you go, there are all these other independent private infrastructure builders. Google, for example, with their balloons that have asked for just a working relationship so that they can sandbox and see if their solution works. Is government now broadly open to having those people test their solutions here? Or even Elon Musk with his satellite?
Yeah, of course, generally, yes. Government is open to new technologies. Of course, there are regulations, there is licensing required. Definitely, things have to be done right. However, as a country, we are open to lowering the cost, however ways we can. And within the law, that's what we intend to do.
All right, thank you so much, Michael, Letitia, and Charles. Thank you so much, our audience too, who've been watching us. We've been talking about the challenges of ICT infrastructure within the EdTech space, and we've discussed at great lengths the solutions that can come out of this. So we hope that those solutions can somehow see the light of day. Thank you so much for watching us. We'll see you next month with the next edition of EdTech Mondays. Have yourselves a good day. EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the Mastercard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village.